Hello everyone, Dr. Mike here, TCOM 101. In the last video we talked about this political philosophy called libertarianism. This is so important. This is the philosophy upon which our country, the United States of America, is based. And it's a set of ideas that embraces individual liberty over the state and over governmental authority. Now, our philosophy stresses freedom and liberty, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. The outcomes are perfect. There are real limitations when it comes to pure marketplace libertarianism. If you create a condition where there's absolute freedom, you're going to sometimes get some interesting outcomes. Now, there's a lot of criticisms of the modern media and tech companies. A lot of these criticisms concern how big and powerful the companies have gotten, or the idea that they're controlled by economic interest and profit motives, the idea of the corporate media. There's always been allegations that the media distort our pictures of reality, that media is full of stereotypes, that it's more violent and sexier, and the people in the media are better looking. Okay? And so there's a lot of excesses in media content in terms of representation and other issues that could distort our notions of reality. There are constant complaints about the lack of journalistic integrity. Some people claim that real journalism is dead right now. I don't go that far, but we do have a hyper-partisan journalistic framework right now. But a lot of the criticisms of the media just center around the bottom line mentality, that these companies put profits first, above people and above the planet. So there's a lot of criticisms of the free media system that we have in America. Now, as a result of these criticisms, we've seen the rise of something called social responsibility theory. And I think that the social responsibility theory recognizes some of the weaknesses and limits of pure libertarianism, but I view it as an extension of libertarianism, the idea of social responsibility theory. Now, this theory at its basic level simply insists that freedom carries some responsibilities and obligations. If you're given freedom, this freedom carries certain obligations, certain duties, certain responsibilities. Okay, so you're familiar with this idea from Spidey Man. With great power comes great responsibility. Or the alcohol companies like to remind us, we have the freedom to drink, but we should do this responsibly. So social responsibility theory began to arise in the 20th century, about the middle of the 20th century. And it's just the basic idea here is that media companies should behave in ways that are socially responsible. Social responsibility is what we call a normative theory of ethics. It doesn't describe how the media are, but it describes how the media should be, how they should ideally operate in a free and democratic society. So social responsibility theory lays out some expectations about how the media should operate and in the public's interest. So social responsibility theory asserts that the media should remain free of government control. No heavy-handed government control, lots of freedom, but in exchange, the media have an obligation to serve the public and the public's interest. Now, social responsibility theory is traditionally centered upon the news and information, the surveillance function of the media, that journalists should behave in ways that are socially responsible. But the ethic of social responsibility can be applied to all forms of media content, entertainment, advertising, persuasion. But let's talk about social responsibility theory and the news. Social responsibility theory demands that news divisions and news enterprises have high standards of journalistic performance. And these concerns about journalism really started to come about in the middle of the 20th century when radio and newspapers were the main forms of mass communication. And both of these industries were concentrated in terms of ownership. And there were concerns that radio and TV were not doing a very good job of providing good journalism. So a bunch of academics got together and set up a commission led by a man named Robert Hutchins, who was from Chicago. And they studied the status of the media for several years and then issued a report, a set of recommendations, a report called A Free and Responsible Press. The Hutchins Commission. Now, this group cautioned against ownership concentration. They said we shouldn't have too much concentration of ownership and was very concerned about the media's preoccupation with sensational news. They felt that the news media needed to take more responsibility for its actions to do a better job of providing news and information to the public. So they came up with a bunch of recommendations in this report of the Commission of Freedom of the Press. A bunch of recommendations. Here's one example. They said that the press should provide a truthful, comprehensive, and intelligent account of all the day's events in a context which gives them meaning. Now, that's a great prescription for how journalism ought to operate, but that's a very high ideal, okay, to get at the truth and to report everything, to be comprehensive and to give everybody an intelligent account of what's going on in the world, and most importantly, to give the context and the background, which really provides the meaning. And I'm not even sure if a lot of TV journalism is capable of delivering news that provides all of this, especially the context. Anyway, the Hutchins Commission identified the news media's obligations to society. And these include being informative, telling important stories, and interpreting, analyzing, explaining what's going on in the news. Comprehensive, that means covering everything, no major omissions. Of course, accuracy, objectivity, fairness, timeliness, balance, and diversity. These are the expectations that we should have for good journalism of integrity. Like I said, the social responsibility theory usually centers on information, but we can also apply it to entertainment and persuasion as well. The idea behind social responsibility theory is not government regulation and rules, but self-regulation. No government control, but a lot of self-control and self-regulation. I hope you're hanging in there. I'm going to continue to talk about social responsibility theory. Now, here's an example of social responsibility in the entertainment and the film industry. And this is the situation concerning the depiction of tobacco. What would be the socially responsible way to deal with tobacco if you're a movie maker? We certainly don't want to glorify and promote the use of tobacco. So how should tobacco be depicted in films? Did you know all 6 major movie companies have published individual policies that address tobacco depictions in their movies? These include Walt Disney, Warner Brothers, Universal, Fox, Sony, and Paramount. Now, all of these companies are concerned about how tobacco is depicted in film. This is an example of social responsibility or self-regulation. Let's, for an example, look at Time Warner's tobacco depiction policy, which was adopted back in 2005. Okay, now let me share some of the policy with you. Warner Brothers says it understands that entertainment programming has an impact on habits and culture. Without curtailing artistic freedom, we're sensitive to the impact of the films and the television programs we produce. So Warner Brothers actively works to reduce tobacco imagery in its films. It wants to reduce tobacco imagery without curtailing artistic freedom and artistic license. Well, that's very hard to do, but here's the policy at Warner Brothers. First, Warner Film and TV companies do not enter into any product placement or promotional deals with tobacco companies for any of the films. So no product placement of tobacco products. Now, what about movies aimed at children and the general audience? For those movies, Warner endeavors to reduce or eliminate depictions of smoking in all the films distributed in the U.S. rated G, PG, and PG-13. So reduce or eliminate depictions of smoking in the movies aimed at children. Okay, now, there's some exceptions, some loopholes here. This is to cover the artistic concerns. Okay, so here's the exceptions to the rule. Okay, first, the depiction involves a character who's an actual historical figure known to have used tobacco products. There are a number of these historical figures, and to portray them accurately, you would have to show them using tobacco. Here's another loophole: when the depiction is warranted for reasons of compelling historical accuracy. Suppose the movie is set in a time when smoking is very popular in the culture. Another loophole: the depiction is part of a very conspicuous anti-smoking reference. If the smoking is depicted as part of an anti-smoking crusade, then that's acceptable. But these are the major loopholes. Now, for the movies aimed at adults, R-rated, Warner Brothers doesn't promise to eliminate, but says it wants to reduce smoking and tobacco depictions from those films. Now, not everybody thinks that this goes far enough. There's one group that's kind of an extremist group that says all movies that show smoking should be rated R automatically. This group, Smoke Free Movies, claims one little letter will save 1 million lives. So they want very, very tough standards in terms of the depictions of smoking. What do you think of Warner Brothers' policy? Is it strong? Is it weak? Is it reasonable? Does it seem to be a violation of artistic freedom? Do you think it's a good example of social responsibility theory in action? Here's another area where we could talk about social responsibility, and that's the ethical treatment of animals in film and TV. You know, animals were mistreated for a long time by filmmakers in Hollywood. And the Westerns, for example, were especially hard on the horses, many of which died during production. So back in the 1940s, the American Humane Association started getting access to movie sets to monitor the filmmaking process to make sure that no animals have been harmed. And here's the basic idea. The American Humane Association will not allow any animal to be treated inhumanely in order to elicit a performance. The animals are not props, okay? They're to be treated with dignity and respect. And so they'll monitor the film set in pre-production, production, post-production, and if they feel that all of the behavior has been good towards animals, the American Humane Association will slap a label on the film to declare that no animals were harmed in the making of the particular production. So, treatment of animals, treatment of smoking, these to me are examples of social responsibility theory. Okay, now, yeah, it's not a perfect theory. It's really hard to determine who's responsible to whom and for what. Okay, I'm not saying this is an easy theory. It's sometimes very controversial, trying to decide who's responsible for what. What specific obligations do the media have to the public? I mean, I can think of a handful in terms of news and advertising. The media should be truthful and accurate. The media should always hope to protect children. The media should care about the environment and environmental concerns. The media should celebrate inclusiveness and diversity. The media should care about some of these social issues like smoking. Okay? So you'll have to figure out what obligations you think the media have to the public. Some people think the theory is just too paternalistic. It's a bunch of people saying this is what you should be doing in the interest of society and to protect others. And I get it. At times it does feel a bit paternalistic. What if we really laid out a complete code of socially responsible behavior and then the media failed to live up to it? That would maybe open the door to government intervention. Some people even think that social responsibility theory might violate the tenets of the First Amendment. I don't think so. I think these are all kinds of reasonable forms of self-control, including ratings. The rating system is another example of social responsibility in action. Anyway, there are some people, especially some hardcore libertarians, who say there's no social responsibility for companies to do anything, okay, except to make profit. Maybe you've heard of Milton Friedman, a very famous Nobel Prize-winning economist. He once said the social responsibility of business is to increase profit. Well, that's true. Okay, businesses do have a responsibility to the investors and the shareholders. Well, more recently, people have come to the conclusion, a lot of people, that these companies have a broader obligation. Friedman said that businesses have no social responsibility other than to make money. But I don't think most people agree with that point of view today. Do you agree with Friedman about social responsibility? Is profit really the only duty? Or do companies have a bigger duty to society, to the workplace, to the children, to the consumers? Well, that's all I have for this little lecture on the idea of social responsibility. It's a complex topic. We could only touch the tip of the iceberg here, but I hope you have a little bit better understanding of this notion, social responsibility. So take care of yourselves and continue to behave in ways that promote social responsibility, like wearing a mask. All right, take care. Bye-bye.